October 2nd, 2021. Who's ready to hear an in-depth interview with Linda Moulton Howe? She goes into depth about Antarctica and its strange occurrences with the abduction phenomenon. Listen up, this story gets pretty wild.
All of a sudden, the whole planet, everything is popping more and more and saying, it isn't any longer, are we alone? It's no, the universe is teeming with life. Remote viewers have said that. Military people behind the scenes say that. It's as if something has switched. We've entered a new intersection of some sort. And it feels this year, 2019, to me personally. I have been an investigative reporter and a TV producer and a writer since I graduated from Stanford, 1968. I did a documentary with the Stanford Medical Center. My master's film was with the Stanford Linear Accelerator. So my beat was always science, medicine, and the environment. And it was that arc that took me to investigate when I was a director of special projects at the CBS station in Denver. In '79, there was an upsurge of animal mutilations where there's no blood, no tracks, internal organs can be removed with no surgery on the outside. I'm totally grounded in facts. I like science, medicine, hard science. I get into animal mutilations and sheriffs say, the perpetrators are creatures from outer space. That was 1979. You and I are talking in 2019. During all of this time, how defensive people were, how ranchers never wanted to say that they saw beams of light coming from something in the sky, taking their animals. Everybody has been like in some sort of suspended animation on Earth, where something else kept everybody from talking about what they really knew, what they really saw, what really came in the night. Today, in 2019, for the very first time in my life and profession, it feels like something is just about to tip. That we're going to go from all denial, lies, living on a concocted planet for thousands of years, saying that we're alone in this universe, and now it's going to tip toward truth. And that the power brokers can't stop this. That's what excites me. That it's happening in populations around the world. I can feel it. I can see it in the mail and the phones and everything that I get. If it tips, it's going to be like New Year's Eve to New Year's Day. Everywhere.
I have been feeling this too.
It's happening.
It's the 100th monkey. We're reaching it.
Exactly. And once it happens, all boats rise. All of us who have been trying to find the facts and the truth and report it about other life intelligences and a completely different history of this planet. And that sentence that I was shown in a briefing paper April 9th, 1983 at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico that said extraterrestrial, biological entities, manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien, us. I'm reading a document for the President of the United States in 1983 saying we are the creation of another intelligence by manipulating DNA. Everything I know today, that is absolutely the truth. And for the planet to ignore it, suppress it, lie about it, makes us weaker. Whatever we are, whatever the relationship with something else out in the universe, I love humans. I really think we're worth fighting for. And we're never, ever going to survive if we don't move this planet to telling the truth. about what the governments know is friendly, unfriendly, or neutral, and what our real relationship is to them. If we all begin to understand that, I think it makes us all stronger, less able to be manipulated. Because the big problem on Earth right now is that a tiny 1%, the power brokers, they manipulate everything, the barter system, everything. This is not a planet now that is running and made for humans to survive happily. This is a planet in which the barter system rules every life. You can't have a life without making money. To make money, you become under the control of somebody else. There's something wrong with the entire system. It's not serving humans. If we could get the truth out, New Year's Day.
And speaking of getting the truth out, I had some questions to ask you about your what you're coming out with on Antarctica and your workshop tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, you've recently brought a new insider forward, a former Navy SEAL called Spartan 1, who says that in 2003 he escorted scientists to and from a massive 62-acre octagonal structure located 2 miles under the ice, as has been reported by insiders, 2 miles under the ice near the bottom of the Transantarctic mountain range that separates East and West Antarctica. Now, this isn't the spaceship buried under the ice, as has been reported by Corey Good and Pete Peterson. This is kind of a stacked structure with interior lighting and massive polished granite laser cut hieroglyphs.
Black basalt.
Black basalt. So, what is this structure? Could it be an active spaceport for numerous silver flying discs that Spartan 1 has also reported?
It wasn't Spartan 1 who reported the discs. I know it gets so complicated. 2015, I reported about a naval flight engineer who had been 20 years in the Navy. He spent 10 years in a big C-130 crew in Antarctica, and they would repeatedly see silver discs come up out of the Transantarctic mountains and never cross the Beardmore Glacier, and they couldn't understand why. On another trip, at Pole, what they call at Pole, meaning the South Pole, 6 miles, was a huge, at least the size of a football field, diameter, round hole in the ice. It is associated with National Science Foundation missions and something weird happening with missing scientists. And in the mess hall, people would be talking, military, NASA, NSF, about the fact that there were aliens in an underground installation in Antarctica near that hole in that pole, and that we, humans, were periodically sending missions to go down to interact with whoever this alien presence. That was what's called Brian S. That's the first story. When I reported that is when I began getting other whistleblowers. It was Brian S.
From the same mission?
About Antarctica, which leads me to Spartan 1.
And they were part of the same crew, you're saying, or separate crews that went to the same area?
Different. See, when you have a Navy crew, they're not SEALs. He was a flight engineer in the Navy, and they were running medevac and taking sciences. And in that period, which was it ended in 97, so 87 to 97, Brian S., who talked to me in 2015, was working for 10 years in Antarctica with a C-130 crew, and they flew everywhere. And when they began to notice these silver discs coming up from this particular place on the Transantarctic mountains and never crossing the Beardmore Glacier, they talked. What is this? And if they tried to ask, they would be told to keep their mouth shut. And when there were missing scientists, they had men fly in who obviously were CIA and said, "You do not talk, but they never made him, in this case Brian, sign a non-disclosure agreement. He's never understood that. There were all kinds of weird things that happened. So when I reported that, there was a huge reaction to my radio report, my Earth Files report, and I started getting, I was in a crew, and now
So you have several more that have been coming forward.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's what
This is
leads
great.
to what I'm going to do tomorrow in that workshop with Spartan 1, and you will also be introduced to Spartan 2. They were, it was the Marine who showed up at a conference. Conferences are great because they can be noisy, lots of people. Somebody comes up like this, who they don't know what anybody's saying to me. And it was the spring of 2016 that this man leaned into me and says, I want to talk with you about Antarctica. 7 hours later, it was an incredible discussion. He said, you need to interview my colleague that I call Spartan 1. It took 2 years. This has been one of the most difficult things I've ever done. It took 2 years, and then the only way it would work to protect them is I had to do camera, everything. So it's me and them, and travel, and not being able to use phones, and
You have some sort. I saw you mention some sort of encrypted like texting you used.
Proton mail. It is the only thing that is guaranteed encrypted. The CIA uses it. The NSA uses it. Signal, worthless. Proton is
Everyone
truly-
always talks about WhatsApp. They say WhatsApp's encrypted, and that's nowhere near the
Nobody
case.
else would
It's like
use
they're connected
WhatsApp.
with
No.
Facebook.
So FedEx and Proton Mail and other complicated things. So right now, in February of 2019, I have now finished 2 segments that'll be part of eventually an hour of Spartan 1 and Spartan 2. It is Spartan 1 who is the Navy SEAL on mission in Antarctica, who is describing what he saw and heard for himself. And this is, as far as I know, this is the first time ever that anybody has had a U.S. Navy SEAL, even though he's backlighted and voice altered, describe anything about a huge architectural structure.
Well, that is true because Admiral Byrd's mission, everyone always talks about that, and Rick Obata and those
that was
people, but they're
surface.
not.
That was surface.
Oh,
No,
right.
See, they discovered this 15 to 20 years ago by ground and ice penetrating radar. This is how they found 2 miles down that there were all of these structures that each one covering 62 acres. So starting 15 to 20 years ago, because of our advanced technology, they started sending teams into Antarctica, and they discovered that there already was a deep underwater submarine. Who built it? They've been using
Are
it.
you saying an ancient one?
Well, they don't know. Did Hitler build it? If so, how? How would any human build a submarine entry 2 miles under ice? How? They don't know. They just know that it is so perfect. And then you will hear him describe, and they don't understand this physics at all. They come in the submarine, and you would normally have to worry about what's called atmospheric pressure changes. Everything is completely done as if something is reacting to everything that is happening, keeping everything in a stasis. And then when they come into the corridor from the submarine exit, lights glow. The temperature is 69 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's 2 miles under Antarctic ice. You can see that the first missions what is this? Where is the energy coming from? What is the source of the power? How is there any sustaining warmth at this level in Antarctica? These are the questions that they've been trying to answer.
Oh,
Why?
a question I had when you were speaking earlier. Sorry to interrupt. They said the black sun symbol was on the back of the door.
Oh, he
and
didn't know it was a black sun symbol.
yeah, and you said you figured.
I
that
had
out.
all these things in a notebook, and he picks that out and says that's what was on the back of the doors. Nobody had to apparently talk to him. And that's what it was. It was a photograph of the black sun. Well, now the black sun, it goes back into Mesopotamia. It didn't start with Hitler. Our century associates the black sun with the horror of Hitler and World War II. He was reaching back in history and taking the black sun. And what is so amazing to me is that within 1 week of my doing the airing on the part 1, did part 2 the February 20th, and tomorrow at Conscious Life I am showing both together with other material in between, that I get an email, and as soon as I open up the email, I'm looking at a physics diagram that reminds me of the way those arms come out with the 90-degree angles at the end. And it turns out it was a man in England, a mathematician. He's looking at my YouTube. He knows about this professor at Purdue University, physics professor, sends me from one of her lectures on YouTube about if you have electric charges and you accelerate electric charges at the speed of light, what happens? They move into a sphere.
Wow.
And when that happens, you have electromagnetic frequencies in the form of a sphere, and the sphere creates 90-degree angles. And the physicists are drawing what looks like the ancient black sun. So now I'm in the process of trying to work with physicists and mathematicians. Is it possible that the ancient black sun is actually someone's representation of what is happening when electric charges are, I guess you want to say, traveling at the speed of light? We can't do that. There's nothing on Earth that can do that. But if they are carved into the back of all of those doors 2 miles down in Antarctica, it must be extremely important. And what if it is related to them moving point to point in the universe, bending space-time that Einstein said was theoretically possible? That means that if we had that technology and we wanted to go to the backside of the moon, and we knew how to bend space-time specifically to do that, we could be standing here and then say, turn on the technology, and we go to the backside of the moon into, say, a building that was made so we could breathe and be there. It's called point-to-point travel. I've talked about this with an MIT physicist. I've talked about this with people in East Coast universities. Everybody thinks it's absolutely where things are headed. Yeah. So if 34 million years ago, in what we call Antarctica, when they had no ice, came from someplace else in the universe and decided to be here and they built these huge structures, maybe because they're big, I have no idea. On Antarctica, we now know for the first time, only in the last few years, there were something like 18 volcanoes in the continent of Antarctica. Nobody knew that before.
Oh, wow.
Well, if there were a lot of volcanoes, and if they went off before 34 million years ago or at 34, that could be the source of all of this dense, hard, black basalt. It comes from volcanoes. And somebody knew how to, I don't know, beam it up, create these big structures. We don't know, except that the SEAL who saw this with his own eyes and is talking to me in these backlighted, voice-altered videos, says he ran his fingers and talked with the archaeologist. And he said they put a measurer 7 centimeters into this dense black basalt. Hundreds and hundreds of these. And he said the conclusion was this could not have been done with anything that was like metal on the basalt, not any kind of normal tool, laser. The perfection, he said, the perfection of every curve, and remember, it's going in, if it's 7 centimeters, that's about 3 inches. Going into precise, all these beautiful patterns, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. We can't do that. So, again, the question, if this was all built the last time Antarctica was without ice, 62 acres, 62 acres, 62 acres. I mean, you're talking about vast expanses of structures that are big. So you have to assume that they were built before it became 2 miles of ice. So we don't have proof, but there's a certain logic here that if the last time Antarctica was free of ice was 34 million years ago, there is a likelihood that these are structures that might be 34 million years old.
I have a question from my organization about the timing of all that. So according to your descriptions, this octagonal basalt tower 2 miles under the ice, under the surface of Antarctica, is in pristine condition,
Yes.
with the door mechanisms and even the lighting mechanisms still intact.
Yes.
But naturally is dated back to when Antarctica was ice-free. Mainstream science teaches that this had to be 34 million years ago. But some insiders have claimed that the pole shift that caused the Atlantic to shift to the South Pole to become Antarctica occurred only about 12,000 years ago.
No, last pole shift was 780,000 years ago was the last pole shift, 780,000. We're talking about 34 million years to get back to the last time. In those 34 million years, we can look it up, how many times the pole changed. There have been periods on the Earth where the poles change like every few, like 200,000 or 300,000 years. So 780,000 now is longer than some of the times in between poles, and shorter than others. And what's so fascinating is how little we know. And when you go into, whether it's Wikipedia or to a geophysicist website, you can ask for, show me the graphic of the going back 2 million, 3 million years on pole changes. They've actually done it. And they'll do white, black, white, black, white, black, so that they can separate out the times. And there are places where it's solid, like black, between white. And there have been times when it went way more than 780,000 years. Why? They don't know. And now 780,000, which is the distance that we're living now between the last one, in some of the variations is about 3 times longer than some. And so you look at this and you look at the patterns and you say, logic, there is no periodicity. There is no periodicity to when the poles change. They're kind of general averages. So what would make the pole change? Now here is, to me, one of the most incredible interviews that I have ever done. It was with a University of California physicist who studies the Earth's core. She's female. And she said, at the center, a lot of people don't understand this. We have an iron core, solid, like crystal. And in fact, it's a very specific form of iron that only exists at the pressure inside of our Earth. The diameter of this core at the center of our planet is 2/3, actually 70%, the diameter of the moon. 70%, the diameter of the moon is the iron core inside of our planet. It is surrounded by a liquid iron that moves one direction right next to the iron, and then right around it is another liquid, and it moves the opposite. This is what's called the dynamo. That's what sets up the magnetic fields. If we didn't have that, no magnetic fields.
So you're not saying it has anything to do with Nibiru passing, like a lot of people in this whole community say?
I have tried through astronomers, many. Can you find a period in history anywhere that would match 3,600 years ago, which is what Sitchin said, that there was this planet that came from the far out in the Oort cloud, or out far, did a big oval every 3,600 years, and that when it came through the solar system and caused problems. If there was something that came through every 3,600 years, and if it caused flame, fire, destruction, earthquakes, whatever, there would normally be some record that people would have written down in history. And the astronomers, they can't find physical evidence, they can't find historical literature, they can't find anything that fits 3,600 years ago. The last time in the modern history where something weird, really weird, occurred was 11,500 years ago to 12. And that is where they have found the Siberian tigers in North America. Their entire, their spine is literally twisted 180 degrees, and these were bigger than any cat that we have on Earth today. Huge, strong, and yet their entire backs, I've interviewed a scientist about this, 180 degrees. He said, the only thing that we can think of is that something happened and this huge, heavy cats were brought up into the air, and that they were struggling in, let's say, hurricane, something that had spinning force, and that it was so strong, the cat being launched up and forces going, and all these cats being found with their spines twisted.
Do you think that has anything to do with like what Graham Hancock talks about, in like his book Magicians of the Gods, when he talks about how supposedly some comets broke up in the atmosphere and caused continent-wide wildfires and massive flooding from the shock waves?
It depends on when he's describing this.
I think he put it for that time range, around 11,500.
Okay, well, if it's, see, what happened, it was only on the North American side.
Yeah, that's what he claims.
Yeah, and there is a group in Tucson, and they have studied this so well that they have found whole huge mats, carbon mats, covering all parts of the middle of the United States, up into Canada, down into Mexico. It's huge. And when you see photographs, they've actually come to places where all they have to do is dig a little, and they know how deep to go. And it looks like you're looking at fabric almost under the earth, and it's black, it's fire. And they call it the black carbon mats of 11,500 years ago. Well, it covers from Mexico all the way through the United States, Canada. I mean, what happened? So hypotheses were from this group that some kind of cometary, possibly mixed with asteroid, came with gas that when it hit our atmosphere, it was fire in the sky, and that the whole atmosphere was on fire, and it caused fire on the way down, because it had to be, if it goes from Mexico into northern Canada, I don't know how many thousands of miles, but that was all on fire. And the date,
I heard there used to be monkeys in America before that happened, and now there aren't anymore.
Well, there might be, because it probably was an extinction event. Well, here's another thing that ties in with that date. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, that was only discovered in 1994, and I was there in 2012. It is 15 to 20 ton limestone pillars with T's on the top, and they're placed in large rings in a hillside in Turkey. When the German archaeologist began that dig, he actually began digging for the first time in 93, but they started finding things in 94. He was so astounded by what he was finding that he said, I don't understand, that was a quote, I don't understand what I'm digging up here. And he said that there were a lot of peculiarities about the soil, so he brought in what's called a soil compression physicist. They actually work in a lot of things on the planet. And that's how he made that around the world headline announcement, that they now had soil compression proof that the entire hill of Göbekli Tepe, with all of its mysterious pillars, was built 12,000 years ago. Then the whole thing was covered up at 11,000 years.
And they were filled too, like someone had purposely filled them up.
Exactly. To protect it from what? Now, if we're dealing with
That's what I want to know.
Yeah. And if we're dealing with non-humans who may go Göbekli Tepe and go back through in history 270 million years or more, and they know what's happening, but they, for reasons, couldn't stop whatever this was that came, and they had to live with the fact that the earth was going to be put on fire. I don't know why, but maybe this was their best answer. Cover up Göbekli Tepe.
Like a time capsule for
just cover it up to
humans in
save
the
it.
future.
So these markers on the earth have never proved extraterrestrial habitation unless I've talked with several people who are associated with intel agencies, and they say we have proof that Prometheus and Zeus, who were Greeks, and the famous Titan versus Zeus battle, all extraterrestrial. The Greeks were all extraterrestrial.
From my studies, I've done a lot of studies on this and the different ancient cultures of like the gods and goddesses, and I notice a lot of them, they kind of relate. Like some of these characters, it's like they have different names in different cultures, yes, but they're the same entity. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. And so if you start looking through the lens of something that had the ability to build the pyramids, not just the surface ones. I think we've got pyramids deep under the ground all over this planet. That whatever this advanced intelligence or intelligences is or are, they want to keep humans in the dark. That's what comes out of everything that I've studied for 40 years.
But it was like they were here before and then they left and they wanted to keep things hidden. Why would you think that would be?
It's peculiar because what are we really to a non-human intelligence, allegedly from some other source in the universe, that would manipulate DNA in already evolving primates on this planet in Africa to create Homo sapien that did not exist before they manipulated DNA. Technically, the first answer is, today, if we did that, we would call them androids. We would be the makers. We would be the DNA manipulators. The product of that DNA manipulation would be our creation. We would call it an android. An android is a biological robot. A robot is a mechanical, made out of metal. Clones are a whole other category. All three are manufactured by genetic manipulation.
From my understanding, androids, like the Greys, they usually say the Greys are androids. They are controlled by another source. So are you saying that we could possibly be controlled by extraterrestrials instead of just created by them?
Yeah, exactly.
And this kind of relates to your holographic universe theory you always talk about.
Power brokers. The power brokers are a control system. Vallée was talking about a control system of Earth back when he did Anatomy of a Phenomenon. The control system, the power brokers, could be humans who have made a deal with non-humans to agree that they will keep all of humanity under their thumb in order to get rich, harvest metals, have whatever they get from Earth in this solar system. I know Jim Marrs thought that was, he was a good friend of mine. Jim Marrs wrote Alien Agenda.
I love Jim Marrs.
Oh, yeah. He was
so
just the
unfortunately, he's
greatest.
passed on by everything he said.
But he's there spinning with his hat.
Yeah.
I know he is. And Jim and I would have long discussions about this, that this planet does not function for Homo sapien sapien. This planet is set up to function. There are only 28 families when you take all the money in the world and you take and analyze who actually ends up controlling its 28 families. A system that is set up where the barter system is, you can't live on Earth without being a part of a barter system. So whoever in those 28 families has managed over centuries to end up being one of the control systems of the trillions of dollars passing hands on this planet every day, who the heck are they really? And all of that money that they have manipulation and control on, it isn't helping you, me, it isn't helping anybody. It is only going into their coffers. That's
So are
why
you saying
this
that-
planet is not set up to support humans.
So are you saying that they are almost like collecting gold and oil and these, different things that they could give to extraterrestrials now to this day, these families?
The non-humans would have a reason to use humans that they made to be the worker bees on planet Earth. They would set the agenda. If they wanted gold or molybdenum, rare earth metals, whatever it is they want, genetic material, sperm and eggs in abductions. Clearly, there's a lot of collection of sperm and eggs from Earth in abductions. What is it being used for? Is it being used to create cloned human bodies? So if there are a lot of cloned human bodies, who's using them? That's what I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, and something, I guess, how do you feel about the... Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
Make sure you didn't get tired out.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, well, let me just ask one more question just to wrap this up. So how do you think the secret space program falls into all this that we were all just talking about? If, if everything that we're doing on a planet is for these extraterrestrials, then how are these extraterrestrials kind of allowing some of these humans to start coming out into space or working with them? Like, are they working for them, or how does that all come about?
It is a good question, and I think that at least a framework to think about an answer is this. The remote viewers who worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency and the CIA at the end of the 80s, they had remote viewing at, first of all, is there life in the universe? They all came back. It's teeming with consciousness. Then they had, there are friendlies that are really helping us. There are hostiles that are so hostile they want to annihilate us. In the middle, there are neutrals, totally neutral, have their own game, don't mess with us at all. Some of the remote viewers said that they got that if they were not these friendlies who had been here the whole bloody length of time of Homo sapien, we wouldn't be here. So that there are friendlies who have some vested interest in keeping us alive, keeping us going, but exactly why? And why would there be something in the universe that would want to annihilate humans on Earth? A backwater planet and a little tiny arm and this huge Milky Way galaxy. So when you boil it down to friendly other intelligences, really hostile, but not many. That's what all the remote viewers got, that the hostiles were a much smaller number than the friendlies. And this is how the friendlies could have kept everything here somewhat stable. And the neutrals just, they come and go and they do whatever but they're not involved in the human population drama. That kind of makes sense to me at some level, even coming through the human abductions. So when you start asking about agendas and who, always bring up that framework, which is again, why? Our government, Russia, China, Brazil, they all have craft. They all have bodies. They all have been back engineering technology. It's now time for the governments of the world, whether they're being led by ETs, camouflaged as humans, or whatever they are, to say, we have to tell this planet the truth.
Let's just go down the rabbit hole here for a second, and let's just assume this is some sort of adversarial or foreign technology.
Most of the more than 120 incidents over the past 2 decades are not from the U.S. military or other advanced U.S. government technology.
That's right, Linda. The truth. The world needs to know what's happening with the UFO phenomenon happening on a daily basis. The world has just heard that Congress may have to admit that they're going to have to release off-world materials if they have it in their possession. Also, Lou Elizondo said something about pilots being injured from close encounters with UAPs. This will be a fantastic conversation coming up with the team members tomorrow. Get ready for that, and in the meantime, stay safe and keep your eyes on the skies. We'll see you next time.